and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at Pitafi World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important developments. The first is in reference to the three-member Judicial Commission that has been formed to probe into the recent audio leaks, particularly involving judges and lawyers, and of course with regards to the question marks that are being raised against the judiciary and its moral credibility or its impartiality as well. With regards to many audio leaks that are going to be part of the Commission's probe, this particular commission has the objective of making sure, according to the government, that the judiciary is respected and that in the public domain the institution is strengthened and is not looked at as something that is partial or that has been involved in anything which is unjust, and with of course the political developments as well that have been going on and the kind of stakeholders that have been part of the audio leaks as well, whether or not any former chief justices or lawyers or anyone belonging to the political domains have been involved in something which then points towards a consequence that needs to be meted out to them as well. So we're going to be taking a look at what this Judicial Commission is really going to look at, while at the same time of course taking into account the recent developments, particularly after May 9th in the country and the kind of polarization that currently exists, and with the way that the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is also now evolving, with many of its members leaving the party, citing May 9th as the reasons why, with the Chief Justice of Pakistan and the top court still being accused of partiality towards the PTI chairman, providing him more relief than any other person that has been given in the country, and then also with regards to how this is going to impact the kind of legal proceedings that is going on, particularly the aspects of this Judicial Commission as well, and the plea that has been filed by the PTI chairman against this particular body, claiming that the jurisdiction of the Chief Justice has not been taken into account for appointing the commission, and that the kind of aspects that are related to phone tapping and whether or not that is something that is fundamentally against the rights of the citizens is being factored in, and that there is some sort of political vendetta to the formation of this Judicial Commission. So we're going to try and take a look and understand the formation and then the kind of terms of reference that are part of this commission in light of the PTI chairman's plea as well, and then in light of what has happened and of course the audio leaks and what sort of evidence is going to be gathered and how this inquiry is going to proceed further. That is going to be the focus of our first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to also look at the developments with regards to May 9th and the Chief of Army Staff statement earlier today, speaking about how the incidence of May 9th is intolerable, and this is something that is of course not going to be tolerated by the military installations and of course the kind of attacks and targeted attacks that have been done against them. This is important in terms of the kind of consequences that we've been hearing about, especially in terms of anti-terrorism courts and the Army Act also being utilized for this purpose, and the kind of statements we've been hearing in from the military establishment and the Prime Minister, the ruling elite, who keep on reiterating the fact that the incidents of May 9th are not going to be met with any sort of tolerance, and that the people who have been part of this violence are going to face their consequences, with the Prime Minister also reiterating that those who are innocent will not be targeted, but those who are responsible and what is seemingly a pre-planned targeted attempt is going to face the consequences of this particular trial. So we're going to see how exactly this is going to pan out, especially in light of the political elements also involved within this investigation, what sort of accountability is going to be put through, and the kind of criticism also that seems to be coming in from some quarters with regards to the way that this is being proceeded with and whether or not there is a need for anti-terrorism or military act in this situation. So we're going to explore that in further detail at the end of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by Senior Analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined in the studio by Mr. Umer Gilani, who's a legal expert. Thank you very much, Umer, for being a part of the show. We've also been joined online by Mr. Usama Ghumman, who's a legal expert as well, and Barrister Shabbir, Shah, Advocate, Supreme Court of Pakistan. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being a part of the discussion. Let me start with you, Umer, with regards to the formation of the Judicial Commission. There seems to be already many questions being raised when we just saw the inaugural meeting happen. In terms of course, the way that this is being formed and the way that the reasons that are being cited are, of course, to uphold the sanctity of the institution, the sanctity of judiciary, and to make sure that any questions that are being raised are fully and thoroughly investigated. Do you think that there is anything beyond that in this particular judicial commission? What is being pointed out by the PTI, and what in terms of the way that this is going to proceed forward are going to be the complications that could possibly arise? Yes, Umer.
So I think the Commission of Inquiry Act of 2017, which is the successor of the 1956 Act, clearly allows for the formation of a commission of this nature. So the government has been vested by this law with a very broad power to set up any kind of commission of inquiry. It could be headed or it could be staffed by judges or by anyone else. And the job of the Commission of Inquiry is essentially executive in nature. It is an inquiry commission, not a body that can adjudicate or give any findings that have legal or binding consequences on anyone. So in a sense, it's a recommendatory body, but a body that has the power to compel witnesses to appear before it and also to give testimony. So the question then that arises is, why is this body which is doing work which is executive in nature headed by judges? And I can understand that the government's point of view would be that we have appointed judges to carry out this investigation because the investigation is also about judges. So if we appointed, let's say, a former IG police to investigate the veracity of these or audio leaks which relate to judges, someone could say that this is a violation of the principle of separation of powers. So we have now appointed judges who will investigate other judges. But at the same time, I think there are some concerns about the separation of powers there, because the Supreme Judicial Council exists, in theory at least, to do this very kind of work, which is to investigate misconduct by judges. So it's a complex situation, and I think there's arguments on both sides, because the problem is that we do know that there are some very serious allegations that have been leveled against members of the superior judiciary, and yet the Supreme Judicial Council has been sitting there and doing nothing. So what choice did the government have after that? I really can't think of anything a government that wants to investigate these allegations could have done other than to form a commission of inquiry.
Right. Barrister Shabbir, with regards to, of course, the formation of the Judicial Commission as well, there are questions being raised, particularly from the PTI chairman side as well, in terms of whether or not the Chief Justice was consulted and what sort of aspects are going to be part as the terms of reference of this commission. And then, of course, with regards to the issues of fundamental rights of citizens, particularly in relation to phone tapping. Do you think that all of these concerns that have been raised in the plea by the PTI are valid in terms of the formation of the Judicial Commission so far?
Thank you, Sana, for taking me on your show. First of all, we would have to set the record straight. There are two very, very interesting things. You would recall that during the time when a reference was filed against Honorable Justice Qazi Saab, one of the fundamental issue and legal issue which was taken before the Honorable Supreme Court was that whether a surveillance could be carried out of a judge or a sitting judge, and even if you find out anything, would that be taken into consideration on the doctrine of truth of the poisonous tree? Now, interestingly, at that point in time, Imran Khan's government, as it then was, had taken a stance before the Supreme Court that, yes, it is in the national interest that such surveillance, if required, should be carried out. And these were the arguments which were raised to justify what was otherwise declared an illegal surveillance. So that should, first of all, be brought to record that this was a legal stance which was taken by and under the authority of Imran Khan's government back then. Interestingly enough, the Council had taken a stance that no, you cannot carry out such a surveillance that would amount to a violation of independence of judiciary. Now, this stance was eventually accepted by the Honorable Supreme Court in the review judgment. If you see the review judgment and the earlier judgment also, I must point out that Honorable Justice Maqbool Sahab, that he then was, he had relied on the earlier judgment of Shaheed Mohtarma Benazir Bhutto Sahab's tribal case, wherein judicial, there were audio leaks previously then as well, and it was declared that such leaks were illegal and unconstitutional, as that would amount to a violation of independence of the state. Now, eventually, the law as we speak is that you cannot carry out surveillance of a judge of the court or a high court for that matter, let alone any other citizen of Pakistan. That would be a separate matter altogether. But I think that having set the record straight, that it is interesting that previously the same surveillance was being justified by and under Imran Khan's government, and it was being opposed by Honorable Justice Shah's counsel. So how, at this stage, the commission, which is presided over by Honorable Justice Shah, could accept or take assume jurisdiction in respect of a matter with which my Lord Justice Honorable Shah has fundamental issues with. Although I would also like to bring to your attention COR number 3, which says that this commission will determine violations, if any, of independence of judiciary. Now, it could very well be the case that the same commission goes on to decide and tries to fix those people, first place, who were responsible for illegally tapping his phone. So that could be a very interesting situation, one which cannot be ruled out, in my opinion.
Right. Mr. Usama, the situation, of course, with regards to what Barrister was also pointing towards seems to be far more complicated in terms of especially who's going to be inquiring into this particular issues, and then, of course, the kind of issues themselves that are being inquired. With regards to, of course, the issues of audio leaks, we have seen that in the past year or so, and even perhaps before that, there have been many that have come out which also did not involve the judges or the lawyers, and there have been so much controversy and discussion around the authenticity of audio leaks and, of course, the kind of value that they hold in courts as well. In terms of what this commission is going to be taking a look at and the kind of audio leaks that are being investigated, what is then going to be the credibility of the commission itself if questions can be raised on the same bench that is investigating these issues, and then, of course, with regards to the people who are involved in the audio leaks?
Thank you, Sana. So, Sana, I think Mr. Umer Gilani and Shah Sahab have given very reasonable sort of opinion, and what we see is also a particular predicament in which we as a society, our country, and also our judiciary is, because there are competing interests at play here. One is ensuring judicial independence, but the other is also at the same time is judicial accountability. So what we have seen is that the issue of accountability, the most relevant institution for judicial accountability, which is Supreme Judicial Council, has been rendered meaningless with great respect, by the Honorable Chief Justice himself. So that has created a serious lacuna in the system itself. So in a well-functioning, well-oiled system, this should have the issues that have been raised, since they concern the judicial integrity, judicial independence, so they should have been properly investigated by the Supreme Judicial Council of Pakistan. But what we have seen is this, the Chief Justice.
What was discussed in the courts today also pointed towards that the issues with regards to the Supreme Judicial Council are not being stepped over, and in fact the Judicial Commission is going to be looking at something which does not violate the jurisdiction of the Supreme Judicial Council. Is that not so?
So I think that was considered true, but that was considered more in a sense. So there's a peculiar the composition of commission is such that some of these members, especially Justice Qazi Faiz Issa, and I believe also the Chief Justice of Balochistan High Court, is perhaps is also a member of the Supreme Judicial Council. So what we have seen historically, so for example, if Supreme Judicial Council takes up a case, which happened in the case of Justice Qazi Faiz Issa once he was being persecuted. So the chairperson of the Supreme Judicial Council at that time, I believe Justice Asif Saeed Khosa Saab, so he did not sit on the bench which ultimately reviewed. So I think what the chairperson of the commission was referring to was this conflict of interest, because some of those issues, some of these findings. So if you remember, one of the TORs is what is the appropriate forum which is going to, if those facts, who is going to investigate. So the factual controversy and then their investigation, what the course of action, it is ultimately going to land before the Supreme Judicial Council if this issue. So that might be a tricky part because how can Justice Qazi Faiz Issa, chairperson, sit here and then also sit there? So that controversy is going to prop up again, and maybe he was preempting that controversy, but I don't think that just the preemption, just saying that it won't have any consequences, is going to preempt this controversy, because this controversy, once these issues come before Supreme Judicial Council, and legitimate concerns of propriety, conflict of interest are going to be raised. But ultimately, what I want to emphasize, Sana, is that this is really unfortunate situation that that the federal government had to rely on this act and a constitutional. So remember, Sana, Supreme Judicial Council is a constitutional body. So there's a hierarchy of bodies. It's a constitutional itself provides a self-contained mechanism, an institution for the investigation of improprieties, violations of judicial code of conduct by the judges, and unfortunately, the judges have themselves, in the self-interest, have rendered that institution meaningless, and now the executive is forced to rely on another body and to investigate the judges through an executive order or through an executive machinery, which in the long run might be really harmful for judicial independence. But these judges, these same judges who have rendered the Supreme Judicial Council ineffective, they would be responsible for this unfortunate happening. But ultimately, it is the people of Pakistan, it is the judicial independence, it is our constitutional system of checks and balances that is going to be the victim. And I think history would judge, but also there should be some sort of real accountability of these people who have made the office of Chief Justice so a dictator. So we saw in the case of Saqib Nisar. So Sana, you would remember 120 organizations, civil society organizations, and prominent citizens filed a number of references, including WAF, a Women Action Forum, against Chief Justice Saqib Nisar at that time, and those references were never taken up, and he retired. And once he retired, they asked about those references, and Sana, what response they got from the Supreme Judicial Council? They were, sorry, your references have become infructuous because the gentleman against whom you filed the references has retired. And ever since the establishment of Supreme Judicial Council for last 55, 60 years, I believe only 2 justices have been kicked out through this institution, through this mechanism, out of hundreds, maybe now the thousands of judges that have occupied the constitutional code. So that could only mean 2 things: either there's no corruption or impropriety in the higher judiciary, they are so clean, they are so clean in the society, or there's some problem and that problem is not being addressed, and these justices, they are protecting themselves. But at the same time, we also have to see that if this precedent of the government's executive's interference is established, it can tomorrow we could have executive with malified intentions who can persecute judiciary and independent-minded judges. So we should be very careful in weighing pro and cons of these parallel proceedings, which in one sense are subverting the Supreme Judicial Council's mechanisms.
And your point, Farrukh, it seems as per the discussion that of course the initial objective of this Judicial Commission, as is being talked about, is to strengthen the sanctity of the institution and to make sure that the kind of loss that we seem to see in terms of the credibility or trust in the public with regards to judiciary is restored. But it seems that the Commission is raising more questions than it's answering. Do you think that this is going to help achieve that objective or not?
Right. By raising more questions, you mean more questions are being raised about the commission, or whether it is asking tough questions? Can you clarify that?
More questions about the commission.
Right. Here's a very simple fact. Our media space is dominated by mostly PTI supporters. Similarly, when it comes to our judicial space also, particularly lawyers, there is a sizable number of lawyers also who appear, and I'm exempting the present company because they are all young, technocrats. But there are others who actually appear on other channels, and like Ijaz Essence was earlier, sitting on a program and prejudging the outcome of whatever is going to happen. So the biggest problem right now is, Sana, that there has to be clarity about what this represents. It is an inquiry commission. It is not going to execute anybody. Nobody is going to be called a culprit. It is just going to get facts out, right? And this is exactly what Qazi Faiz Isa Sahab actually was underlying today when he pointed out that his mandate here and his mandate at the Supreme Judicial Council don't clash. Likewise, I don't understand why is it that PTI now thinks Suhail Badai Sahab today was in a program was saying that when he met Imran Khan Sahab, he said that we don't want to be partisan, we don't want to come between this, in the middle of this fight between, or this polarization between judges. So I don't know why does PTI now think that it wants to stink up their reputation of the Chief Justice of Pakistan and others by trying to be a party to one side, especially after May 9th. In my humble view, there are clear questions, because Pakistan's biggest dilemma that I keep on bemoaning day in, day out is concentration of power because of unstructured centers of power. Too much power is given to one man. For example, Chief Justice of Pakistan. Similarly, he is also, he is not only the master of roster, he is also in charge of what happens in Supreme Judicial Council. Similarly, he can form whatever benches he wants. And when it comes to various cases also, especially when it comes to his own, curtailing or restructuring his own suo motu power, he can freeze a law or make it redundant. So this kind of power essentially, and when we have seen it being abused in front of everybody, that has actually caused people to start questioning judiciary's credibility. So there are two timelines that actually follow from here. One, judiciary actually makes peace with this crisis and tries to resolve it. The other one is the CJ's way, that pretend nothing bad is happening and continue the way you are continuing. So you can imagine what happens in either of those two timelines, right? In the first one that I mentioned, where you actually atone for the faults and you try to fix it, I see a great opportunity in this commission because it can resolve many unresolved issues. By the way, Sana, another very interesting thing that is being discussed is that the TORs don't include, particularly, although one of our participants has actually pointed out that TOR number 3 actually gives implicit permission to actually investigate these sources also, right? But the problem at this moment is I have been very consistent in on the issue of wiretapping. Even before Panama Papers, I was repeatedly saying that wiretapping should not be allowed. And then when Panama Papers actually surfaced, at that time also I kept on saying that the data that you are going to use is essentially stolen property. If you can admit it as evidence in the court, then it is going to create a new kind of direction that we are going to take. And that is exactly what happened. By the way, Panama also gave you another example, the role of a supervisory judge, right, Sana? Justice Ijaz Hassan was not only a supervisory judge when it came to lower judiciary, but then he also sat on the bench. And because of all that, I think that whatever is happening, anybody who is actually trying to question this commission is actually has only flawed arguments, and I think the people who are on the bench on this commission are a proof that it is going to be objective. Regarding the stolen information, my only humble submission is, had it been created before May 9th, at that time situation would have been much different, right? Because now May 9th has happened, and you think at least the state of Pakistan believes that there was a massive conspiracy to destabilize the state of Pakistan. In that situation, because national security is a legitimate concern, many of these wiretappings actually become legitimate. Even then, I think that there is going to be some kind of questioning about this as well, and we are going to follow it.
All right. Mr. Umer, the situation with reference to, of course, the kind of objections that are being raised, of course, as Farrukh talked about, we need to understand the value that the Commission brings. But there is, of course, the issue with regards to the credibility of the courts in general as well, the way that the judiciary and the Parliament have had their rifts, the way that we have been hearing about the rifts even between the judiciary. And then when we talk about the different political parties, particularly the PTI looking at this stance, how will then will we be able to make sure that whatever the Judicial Commission brings about in terms of whatever the inquiry unfolds is going to be accepted and is going to be investigated thoroughly, and then the credibility of whatever investigation actually takes place is respected by the executive? And secondly, if the objections that are being raised to the Judicial Commission do not seem to have value, then can we safely say that the plea that has been filed by the PTI chairman would also not hold any value?
So I think this is something interesting and important to think about. What does the Commission do? The Commission can only find out the truth, and just the power of the Commission depends entirely on the power of the truth that it is trying to discover. The Commission cannot enforce its findings. The government that has formed the Commission is not even bound to follow the recommendations of the Commission that the government itself has constituted. So the Commission is something, an executive commission under the Commissions of Inquiry Act is entirely different from a judicial commission that is formed under Section 75 of the CPC, such as the MUBARAK Commission, or a judicial commission that is constituted by a court. That is the kind of a commission which actually has adjudication power and some worth, some value, some legal value. And precisely because a judicial commission has legal value, to form a judicial commission would overstep on the jurisdiction of the Supreme Judicial Council. But an innocuous commission of inquiry which can do nothing other than find out the truth, one could argue is not an encroachment on the jurisdiction of the Supreme Judicial Council. And I also want to pose a hypothetical here. Imagine a situation in which these audio leaks were one of the, I want to mention these. What are we talking about? The TUR mentions that there is a phone call between an ex-chief minister of the Punjab and an advocate regarding fixation of some cases before a particular bench. We're talking about a phone call by the son of a former Chief Justice awarding tickets. Some pretty embarrassing things. And now imagine if the Supreme Judicial Council had already initiated a reference to investigate these events. If that had happened, I think there would be a lot of weight in the argument that a commission of inquiry cannot be constituted, because this sort of a commission would in a sense impinge upon the independence and the work of the Supreme Judicial Council. So if the Supreme Judicial Council was actually had done the right thing, it had performed the duty that the Constitution puts on it, then I think there would be some weight in what the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf is saying, that if this SJC is doing something, no commission of inquiry can do that. But in a situation where the SJC has decided to stay completely silent on the matter, what choice do we have?
But then I want to understand, if the findings are not binding on the government or for any action to be taken, what value do they hold?
The value that truth holds in a society, you can never underestimate that. Even the most, I would say, remorseless human being is afraid of the truth coming out.
But is there not a possibility of it being rejected as false?
Absolutely. That is precisely the power of an inquiry. You can reject it, but the interesting thing is that even those who will reject it will still be afraid of it. You know, there's something intrinsic there is some intrinsic value to truth in societies. And when I try to explain what a commission of inquiry or a parliamentary committee can do, as a matter of fact, they have no executive power, and yet there is such a fear that they instill in the hearts of those who have done things that they do not want the world to find out. So it's a beautiful thing in some ways, and let's see what the Supreme Court tomorrow has to say on the subject.
All right. Barrister Shabbir, I want to talk a little bit more also about the way that the inquiry is going to proceed and the evidence is going to be gathered, because in the past whenever we used to talk about audio leaks, we kept on hearing even from legal experts saying that they don't have legal value, that it's very difficult to establish the authenticity of the audio leaks, and that moving forward it's going to be too complicated for this to even be part of any court as evidence. And then of course there was also the discussion today in terms of advertisements being given in papers as well to gather more information, interviews being conducted, even if if there is any need for people to go to Lahore and interview some women who apparently are also involved. But in terms of the way that this evidence is going to hold true, I want to understand how will, for example, the Punjab Forensic Agency be able to contribute if it's very difficult to establish the authenticity of the audio leaks itself? How will the public be able to contribute, and how much will this evidence hold value in terms of the investigation as it unfolds?
I think I would have to agree with Umer Saab to the extent that he has explained that the commission will only submit the report, and then it's up to the government to, for example, if the report finds that certain persons were involved in an illegal activity, then two things could possibly happen. One, the government could file a complaint. The government could decide to prosecute on the basis of the report itself. And the Supreme Judicial Council could also, on its own, take action, assuming or in the event that any report finds any judge to be involved in any of the allegations. Now that is, of course, hypothetically speaking, but you can also not rule out the fact that two other possibilities could also happen. So, for example, at this point in time, the commission, the very constitution of the commission, obviously lies in our challenge. The Supreme Court can pass a restraining order preventing it to proceed any further. But assuming that the commission does proceed further and pursues its mandate, in that event also, the findings of the commission would be challenged through a writ before any high court, for that matter. And the high court can, during the pendency of the petition, also grant any interim orders. For example, previously, you would any other commission for that matter. The High Court can judicially review on a number of grounds, procedural impropriety, or even on the ground whether or not the commission proceeded with jurisdiction or without jurisdiction. So I don't see any action as such in the near future on the findings of the commission, even if it concludes its mandate. But yes, if the report comes out in public, then those against whom such a report is coming would see that their credibility is under attack. And it is this aspect of the matter where independence of judiciary comes into play. You see, I would like to conclude, at least insofar as this point is concerned, that there is a famous doctrine of truth of the voiceless free. In England and even in Pakistan, it is admitted that if the phone tappings are inherently illegal, any result, even if eventually it results in a finding, that cannot be taken into consideration in evidence. So it is prohibited. So on that account, I see my opinion on this matter is that this commission is would eventually violate the independence of judiciary and is not proper. I mean, if I were Justice Shah, I would have recused myself, at least from the commission also, because fundamentally, not anyone else, but Justice Shah's point always was that phone tapping in itself is illegal. Therefore, you cannot look any further. So on that account, I think.
All right.
Until and unless, yeah. Until and unless.
All right.
Yes.
Go ahead. Until and unless.
See, until and unless this very commission gives a finding on point number 3, which is that violations of independence of judiciary. Remember, this is also one of the TOR.
All right. Thank you very much, Barrister Shabbir, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Mr. Usama, I would also take your opinion, especially in light of the value that the audio leaks themselves would hold, and the contribution of the forensic agency in terms of establishing the authenticity and how much they're going to contribute towards the findings, and also point towards the issue with regards to if this is going to be found to be fake or fabricated, the way that finding is going to result in any sort of consequence, particularly keeping in mind the kind of issues that Barrister was talking about regarding phone tapping.
I think that the questions that you have raised, they in fact strengthen the argument that the tasks that have been assigned to this commission and TORs, they were the most appropriate tasks for the Supreme Judicial Council due to the profound ramifications. So one of my learned colleagues had said that the truth will set you free. So there are two ways of regulating all over the world. So for example, one is through active regulation and the other is through active seeking of information. So for example, in US, the entire financial sector is regulated by the US Security Exchange Commission solely on the basis of information. They don't have any positive, very bare minimum of positive regulation. So for example, this commission has power to seek information and enforce attendance of witnesses. So let's say this commission decides to seek some information or documents. So can this commission call up the Chief Justice, and it also has power of contempt of the High Court. So can this commission send the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Pakistan and the head of Supreme Judicial Council behind bars for refusal, or can it? So for example, one of the allegations is that the Chief Justice formed benches on the instigation of ex-Chief Minister Punjab, Pervez Ilahi. So what if the Commission for the Actual Inquiry wants that how those benches were formed and what were the summaries put, and they requisition these summaries and documents from the Chief Justice, and if he or registrar, and if he refuses, can they send them behind bars? So I don't think it is that simple. And also remember, this act has power, gives the power to the commission to start a police investigation. So they can also authorize a grade 17 police officer to enter the chambers of the of the Chief Justice and seize record. It can also refer the case of the magistrate. So imagine Chief Justice of Pakistan appearing before a magistrate for defiance of the orders of the this commission. So I don't think it is as that simple, considering that what's the powers of attendance, of 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 record seeking, information, and also the ability to recommend action and also criminal prosecutions that the commission has. So that, so coming to your question, so it would have been appropriate because the Supreme Judicial Council, the Constitution gives the Supreme Judicial Council powers that it can, not that all the authorities should also comply with its order, but it can also recommend to them. And this issue came up in the Justice Qadi Faiz Isa's case, that the way the Supreme Court had this power to direct the FPR and relevant authorities to investigate if those allegations they related to the violation of judicial code of conduct. So in that sense, we could have avoided, but unfortunately, we're not in a ideal situation.
Right, absolutely. I understand your point. Thank you very much, Mr. Usama, for joining us and being a part of the debate. Farrukh, anything you'd like to add to this? And then, of course, since we're short on time, please also add comments with regards to the statement made by the Chief of Army Staff regarding the incidents of May 9th and how whatever has happened is intolerable.
Boy, you're very smart. By juxtaposing both opportunities, you have ensured that if I actually talk on the first topic more, I'm going to do it at the cost of the latter, even though look at the time.
It's all in your hands.
In 2 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, by the way, I wanted to first of all compliment, Ghumman Saab on his vivid imagination, especially to the breaking point. Then I wanted to actually, compliment Barrister Shabbir also for his remarkable balancing act. In the end, he ended up compromising on the other side as well. But we Pakistanis have, Sana, as I keep on saying, this bad habit of hitting the target but missing the point. I'm not talking about the current participants, but national discourse. Right now, when you talk about the way it can be abused, this commission, it actually reminds me of a popular reference. Harry Potter, in the 4th book, is accused of conjuring the dark mark, which is essentially the sign of Voldemort. So when he is accused of that, somebody says, are you out of your mind? Don't you know who you are accusing? Similarly, just look at the man who is heading this commission. Do you know why he had to go through hell? Because he was demanding clarity on the manipulation of certain agencies. So if you think that somebody who actually, went through all the crisis to actually maintain his stance would compromise now, is ridiculous, right? Similarly, I think that there is one, comment that is very important, the one leak that is very important, and it has something to do with our own brethren, right? Abdul Qayyum Siddiqui and Khaja Tariq Rahim. The day Imran Khan was let go, a day before that, this talk is taking place, and Khaja Tariq Rahim is telling us how exactly is he going to let, or how exactly judiciary is going to let Imran Khan go. And that is exactly what happened. So this smoking gun and similar others, I mean, Khaja Saab's talk with Saqib Nisar's sons, selling of tickets, all of them are important. Now let us talk about the importance of martyrs in this country. And the way our certain quarters have been actually playing fast and loose with them, right? I think that the army chief, when he spoke today, was absolutely right. The countries that don't honor their martyrs, their sacrifices, are lost somewhere in oblivion. I think that after May 9th, we have to resuscitate the celebration of their sacrifice and pay homage to them. That's why we are going to have 25th March, May, as the day commemorating their sacrifices, because before General Bajwa came to power or became army chief, before that they used to be similar kind of days. Then he sort of merged it with Defense Day Pakistan, and eventually it petered out. But I think that there is so much sacrifice that is going on in this country that we have to actually keep reminding people who our heroes are and at what cost they serve you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Farrukh, and for making sure that you get everything in the time that I gave you. And thank you very much, Mr. Umer, for joining us and being a part of the discussion as well. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.